In the serene town of Pennsylvania, certainly not as industrial like West Pittston we had seen in The Conjuring Last Rites, 17 third graders went scampering out of their house one night during the witching hour in a creepy manner at a consistent speed, undeterred by the terrain and the lack of visibility. With the affluence of closed-circuit camera and doorbell camera, the synchronized running from home by these 8 years old felt awfully creepy, narrated by a child succinctly and to the point, and having George Harrison's Beware of Darkness as the accompaniment to make the sequence even more bewildering and sinister, we had an eye-catching prologue to bring us to the world of Zach Cregger's Weapons. When the form teacher Justine came into the classroom like any other school day to see only a solitary boy by the name of Alex, it was the start of her life spiraling out of control. It was natural for the parents, the authority, and the school to pin the mass disappearance to Justine and Alex, or felt they would be the ones having the insight to the incredulous event. It felt legitimate that neither was clued in and was astounded by it as the rest of the town. It was prevalent to feel sympathy for Justine when she was publicly persecuted in front of a cavalcade of angry and disenchanted parents demanding for answers, even though deep inside they knew that she was not the person to provide it. Leading the charge was the father of one of the missing children, Archer, who was enveloped with the resolution of finding his boy Matthew, using all means possible. Some were a bit inappropriate, and his expertise, while slowly neglecting his business. Archer was no way closer than when he started, even though he felt that the police and FBI have been dealing with the case at a snail pace. Meanwhile, being smothered by the pressure from furious parents, while personally disturbed by what had happened to her students, Justine would want to uncover the mystery despite the school's stance of steering away from it, and she would be constantly being intoxicated as an escape and had a tryst with a married ex-boyfriend. If you have remembered my review for Stephen Connecty's 825 Forest Road, he had made use of chapters based on the different characters' perspectives at the start of the story and would converge to the climactic end. Zach Cregger adopted the same style of storytelling, not entirely non-linear, but retelling certain situations through the lens of various characters. First of all, we have Justin Timberlake as Justine. Doesn't it all make sense in the character's naming convention? Well, actually, it was actress Julie Garner, whom we have last seen in Lee Whannell's Wolfman, and I remember I was scouting with her performance and character's development in that movie. As the elementary school teacher, I could feel her helplessness, especially being subjected to a mass persecution and in a dire need of a bulwark to fend her from all these mental and at times physical abuses. Despite the school's persistent objection, she would try to get more information out of young Alex, the only student that did not disappear. And through her shoddy investigative work, we were subjected to some of the scares that would entail what was actually going on. Justine was not a likable character and she had flaws, but I was rooting for her to get to the bottom of it and cleared her name. As for Garner herself, who had supporting roles in other horror features like The Last Exorcism 2 in 2013, and starring more recently in Apartment 7A, the prequel to Rosemary's Baby, once again there was nothing illuminating in her performance. The next chapter will be on Archer, and we have Josh Brolin in the role, and in typical Hollywood setting, his name would usually be on the marquee in front of anyone else. As I have mentioned, there was nowhere on earth that Archer would not go to find his lost son Matthew. His obsession was telling, but his methodology was less violent as compared to Hugh Grant's role in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, but certainly there were parallels to be drawn in these paternal characters. I appreciated the fact that despite being a man in the labourer's industry and drove a heavy-duty pickup truck, and just looking at Brolin, he was not a man to meddle with. The character himself was not overt in masculinity, and there were a lot of subtlety and holding back, and was not being abrasive to everyone, even Justine, whom he had been targeting, despite his manic search for his son. The other point of views came from characters who felt that were not crucial to the grand scheme of things, but they were all affected by the same threat as the children. Alden Ehrenreich, who once was touted as the next big thing in Hollywood, and was cast as a young Han Solo in the standalone Star Wars movie that crashed and burned, was unrecognizable in his 80s porn star Tash, and his character Paul was the old flame of Justine. Paul was a character quite well fleshed out, with his alcoholism issues, and his father-in-law was the police chief, He felt that Paul was constantly on his toes and was not really competent in his policing work. Pairing up with Paul was James, a recalcitrant drug addict who was instrumental in uncovering the truth by sheer chance. The character felt like Jay from Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob. Then we have Marcus, the school principal who we felt like an unfortunate victim who got caught in the line of fire. Played by the highly recognizable Benedict Wong, there was a spine-chilling moment to the school principal that would foretell what was to come when the antagonists got their way with the people in town. There was an instance of altercation between Garner, Rowling, and Wong that linked Justine and Archer from that point onwards, and with their involvement in the MCU, it felt like Thanos was fighting Wong to allow Silver Surfer to escape. Young Cary Christopher played Alex, who for me was the real victim in the story. We saw flashback of his life that he had been subjected to bullying in class but swallowed the abuse in and not making a big fuss. His only salvation came in the form of his loving parents, especially his father who had that affectionate alone time with Alex on their journey towards and back from school. His life was wrecked when someone came into their lives, and he still mustered enough strength and courage to combat this force of evil. Amy Madigan was an actress who was reasonably well known in the 1980s, with her turn in popular movies like Uncle Buck with the late John Candy and Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner. Mrs. Ed Harris was in the role of Aunt Gladys, who I had seen becoming an internet meme and eventually the one true character that could create a memorable zeitgeist. Whether it was a success from the makeup artist or how Zach Cregger had written the character, Madigan gave us a performance that justified the point that even if she was your blood relative, it does not mean that you should show care and concern to her when you will not even be in close contact with one another. Director Zach Cregger was part of a comedy troupe and had been featured in some sitcoms, but like fellow comedian turned horror movie director Jordan Peele, Cregger found his calling in writing and directing horror movies that would mess with the minds of his audience. It started with 2022's Barbarian, a story of an Airbnb stay turned deadly, a movie I really needed to catch up soon. Cast members in that movie Justine Long and Cregger's own wife, Sarah Paxton, a legit scream queen in her own rights, had cameos here in Weapons. The critical success of that movie made people excited for his follow-up movie, and the anticipation was well rewarded. The non-linear storytelling from various characters did not feel distracting. In fact, I enjoyed the pace and the plot was told in a seamless manner, with niggling plot issues being tied up. Even the effect of individual victims was taken into consideration. There was no need to spell out the motive of the antagonist, nor a need for a person or an event to deliver the expositions. It was very clear what was happening, and the unscrupulous action of the source of evil was relentless and simply non-redeeming. It was very satisfying for the plan to be spoiled by the one character we might be truly rooting for. The side characters were all being utilized. Whether it's successful or not, it was up to the audience, but at 125 minutes, the movie did not feel long at all. There was that customary jump scare in the first act of the movie to satisfy some conventional horror fans, but it was the plot and the character that hooked you to watch until the end. The violence and body horror on display felt like those elevated horror movies from A24, as it was delivered in a subtle manner, like a matter of fact in storytelling. There were some blatant homages paid to horror films that inspired Cregger, but I enjoyed the part with intruding people's house like something I have seen in one of those Bond movies, as well as Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead. Weapons and The Conjuring Last Rite was bountiful for Warner Brothers in terms of box office earning for consecutive months, and with the likes of Sinners and Final Destination Bloodlines, I think the execs in the studios might be ready to sanction more horror movies into production in coming years. The string of Warner Brothers distributed horror movies had been garnering high praise and stellar ratings. Therefore, Weapons would not be any different, a memorable and creative horror movie with a solid plot and even minutiae like a voiceover or song to rouse the mood overall. I'm awarding the movie an 8.5 out of 10. It is October and we are entering the month of Halloween. And after a bountiful first 3/4 of 2025, what will be in store for the autumn months? Stay tuned by subscribing to this channel. One of the big success for Warner Brothers was The Conjuring Last Rite, which was part of the extensive franchise review I had done previously. I have friends who were in the teaching profession and dealing with children who could drive you up the wall more than finding rewards at the end of the tunnel. So having an entire class of irritating kids disappearing might not be the worst thing ever.